want to start today with this idea that feels a bit like a magic trick, but it's really just biology. It's the concept of the invisible mechanism.
Right.
We all walk around thinking we're recording reality, like a high-def camera catching every single detail.
Okay.
But the stack of research we have today suggests it's basically a lie we tell ourselves.
It is a comforting lie, though. We like to think we're these objective observers, but the reality is that our brains, our laws, even our history are defined just as much by what we ignore as by what we actually see.
Exactly. And we are looking at a stack of sources today that, honestly, it looks like someone just dropped a library card catalog on the floor.
It's quite a mix.
Yeah, we've got the psychology of why you might miss a gorilla standing right in front of you. We have a deep neurological study on, of all things, the love life of the midshipman fish.
And a very heavy dossier on a century of U.S. regime change.
And to top it all off, a crash course in trademark law via a sandwich shop case study.
It sounds chaotic, I know, but the thread holding it all together is this idea of distinctiveness and awareness. Whether you're a fish trying to mate, a superpower trying to shape global politics, or just a business owner trying to name a sub shop, you're in a battle between signal and noise.
So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out how that filter works. How do we decide what gets to be real and what just gets, deleted? And I want to start with the classic example, the gorilla.
The famous inattentional blindness study, Simons and Shepries.
Now, most of our listeners have probably heard this setup. It's a classic. You watch a video, two teams passing basketballs, one in white shirts, one in black. Your only job is to count the passes made by the white team.
Simple enough.
But while you're doing this, a person in a full gorilla suit walks right through the middle of the scene.
Thumps their chest, is on screen for a full 9 seconds, and then just walks off.
And the headline finding, one everyone quotes, is that about 50% of people miss the gorilla completely. But going through the source material, I realized that the did they see it or not part is actually the least interesting thing about the whole study.
I completely agree. The surface level take is just people are unobservant. But the deeper dive is why. It's not a vision problem, The photons from the gorilla are hitting your retina. It's a processing problem. It's like a cognitive deafness.
It reminds me of the cocktail party effect, right? You're at a loud party, you're focusing on one conversation, and the rest of the entire room just becomes this indistinct hum.
Precisely. To perform the task counting the passes, your brain has to aggressively suppress what it considers noise. And because you're told to track white shirts, the big black gorilla gets categorized as dark objects to be ignored.
But this is where the research gets really counterintuitive. I think this was the part that really surprised you.
Oh, absolutely. The capacity factor.
Yes. I always assume that if you're, smarter, if you have a higher working memory capacity, you'd be better at spotting the gorilla. You could multitask better.
And the data says the exact opposite.
Which is wild. The sources suggest that people with a higher working memory are actually more likely to miss the gorilla.
Well, it makes sense if you think about it. If you have a high working memory, you are excellent at focusing. You're excellent at following instructions and filtering out distractions. So you are, in a way, better at being blind to the unexpected. Your brain is just a more efficient and less answer.
So being smart or focused can actually be a liability when the rules of reality suddenly change. If you're too good at the task, you miss the context.
And the stakes here aren't just about missing some guy in a suit. The source material brings up the clown study by Erokhane. This wasn't in a lab. It was out on a college campus. A unicycling clown.
I read that. A literal clown on a unicycle.
Yeah.
And people on their cell phones just walked right past him.
Looked right at him and didn't register him. But let's scale this up to life or death. The sources discuss a police misconduct simulation based on the Kenny Conley case.
Right. This was the Boston officer who was chasing a suspect and claimed he didn't see a brutal beating happening right next to him.
And everyone just assumed he was lying. The blue wall of silence. But researchers simulated a chase, and they found that under that high cognitive load, your peripheral awareness just collapses. At night, 65% of participants missed a staged fight happening just feet away from them.
That is terrifying. It implies that tunnel vision isn't just a metaphor, it's a physiological state where we can literally edit out violence if it's not part of our immediate mission.
We assume we'd notice the anomaly. 90% of people believe they'd see the gorilla.
Yep.
But we are programmed to see what we're looking for and basically nothing else.
Speaking of being programmed, let's bridge this to our second stack. We're moving from the psychology of the human brain to the neurobiology of the midshipman fish.
A fascinating creature.
A love this because it takes that idea of a filter and shows how it's hardwired right into the biological circuit board. We're looking at a study on male midshipman fish and how they court females.
But not all males are the same. This is crucial. You have two very distinct morphs, or, types of males.
You've got the type I males. These are the jocks of the fish world. They're large, they build nests, and they act as the guardians. They also literally vocalize to call the females over.
And then you have the type 2 males.
The sneakers. Small, no nests, no humming. Their entire strategy is to wait until a type I male is mating, then rush in, release their sperm, and try to steal the fertilization.
It's what biologists call cuckoldry. It's a parasitic reproductive tactic. But the study wasn't just observing behavior, they were looking at the brain, specifically the preoptic area and a group of neurons called POA-gal neurons.
And the hypothesis was that this chemical, galanin, is the switch for parental and mating behavior.
Right. Now here is the nuance that I found so compelling. You might think these neurons would fire whenever the fish is, vocalizing, like a speak command, or maybe whenever they're near eggs.
But they didn't. The data shows these neurons only lit up in type I males, and only during the specific act of active courtship and spawning. Not when they were just humming to an empty ocean. Not when they were guarding the nest later.
It suggests a very precise neural trademark for a specific social context. So what about the type 2 sneakers? They're spawning too, right?
That's the kicker. The type 2 brains stayed dark. Even though they are technically performing the act of fertilization, the entire courtship circuit is just bypassed. They're running different software.
Or maybe a different operating system entirely. And this is where the deep dive part really hits.
Which basically means evolution doesn't like to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly. We see the same galanin peptide in the preoptic area of mice. It drives parental care in mammals. So you have this lineage stretching from fish all the way to rodents and probably to us, where this specific brain region is hardware for social bonding and fertility.
It's like finding out that the code running your smartphone is based on the same kernel as a computer from the 1980s. The context changes. Water versus land, fins versus hands, but the signal processing is the same.
And just like the gorilla study, it shows the brain is highly selective. It filters reality. For the type I fish, the environment triggers this specific neural cascade. The type 2 fish, looking at the exact same environment, that cascade doesn't happen. Their reality is different because their biological filter is different.
So we have brains filtering visual noise, and we have neurons filtering social behavior. Now I want to zoom out, way out. We're going to look at how that same drive to define reality plays out on the world stage.
We are moving to the dossier on U.S. regime change.
This stack is heavy. It's a catalog of U.S. interventions from the late 19th century to the present. And what struck me isn't just the sheer number of them, but the evolution of the mechanism. It feels like we're watching a nation try to impose its own filter on the rest of the world.
That's a strong way to put it. If you look at the early entries, Hawaii in 1893, the Philippines in 1899, it was about expansion, overt imperialism. But as we move into the Cold War, the guerrilla becomes communism.
The U.S. becomes so hyper-focused on the Soviet threat, counting the passes, if you will, that it starts seeing threats everywhere.
And justifies some pretty extreme measures to neutralize them. Take Guatemala in 1954. This wasn't just a political disagreement. The CIA literally compiled a handbook of assassination during the operation to overthrow Jacobo Arbenz. They systematized the removal of a leader because his agrarian reforms were categorized as red.
And then you have the Jakarta method in Indonesia in 1965. This feels like a real turning point in the documents. It wasn't just a coup, it was the facilitation of mass slaughter.
It was. The U.S. provided lists of suspected communists to the Indonesian military. We are talking about 500,000 to 1 million people killed. The source material argues this was a defining moment because it proved that you could reshape a nation's entire identity through sheer brutality without necessarily putting American troops on the front line.
It's interesting how the method shifts again after the Cold War. We go from these covert, deniable operations to the post-9/11 era. Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya.
The filter changed. The guerrilla was no longer communism, it was terrorism. And suddenly the mechanism became overt military intervention, boots on the ground. But the underlying logic is the same as the midshipman fish or the visual cortex. Identify the signal, your ally, identify the noise, the threat, and then eliminate the noise.
But just like the police officer chasing the suspect, the you are that focused on the threat, you miss all the collateral damage. You miss the long-term instability.
You create a vacuum. In Iran, in 1953, getting rid of Mossadegh solved the immediate problem of oil nationalization. But it created the conditions for the 1979 revolution. The tunnel vision of 1953 blinded policymakers to the reality of 1979.
It's a sobering pattern. We try to edit the map to match our territory, but the territory fights back.
Which brings us to a strange, but I think necessary pivot. We've talked about biological identity and political identity, both of which are often violent or subconscious. But what happens when you try to define identity in a purely logical, legal framework?
We are going to the sandwich shop.
A palate cleanser in subject matter, perhaps, but conceptually, this is the other side of the coin. Regime change is about imposing an identity on someone else. Trademark law is about defending your own identity from being absorbed.
So we've got a case study here, Mike and Emma. They own Big Mike subs. They get a cease and desist letter because their name is too similar to a national chain. They need a new name.
And this is where most people, including Mike and Emma, fail. They think a name should describe what they sell. They want to call it gridded subs because they grid iron the bread.
Which makes perfect sense to a normal person. But in trademark law, that's a death sentence.
Exactly. This introduces the spectrum of distinctiveness. It's a legal hierarchy. At the bottom, you have generic and descriptive. If you call your place gridded subs, you are just describing the product. The law offers you almost no protection because you can't stop other people from describing their sandwiches.
You can't own the language.
Right. If you want protection, if you want to be a gorilla that stands out, you have to move up the ladder to suggestive, arbitrary, or fanciful.
Let's break those down. Arbitrary is my favorite category.
Arbitrary is powerful. It's using a real word that has absolutely no connection to the product. Apple for computers. Dove for soap.
It forces the brain to create a new neural pathway. An apple isn't a fruit anymore, it's a laptop.
And the strongest category is fanciful. Made-up words. Kodak. Xerox. These words have zero baggage. They mean nothing except the brand. They are pure signal, zero noise.
So back to Mike and Emma. They looked at urban subworks, but that was too crowded. Too much noise in the marketplace.
Too many urban subs already existed. They would have been completely invisible.
So they landed on Subterra Kitchen.
Which is a great example of a suggestive mark with arbitrary elements. Sub works double-duty sandwich and submarine, or underground. Terra means earth. It evokes an image, an underground, maybe exclusive spot, without literally saying, we sell sandwiches in basement.
It forces a consumer to do a split second of cognitive work. And because of that, it sticks.
And legally, it was clear. By moving away from the descriptive, by choosing to be distinct, they carved out a protectable territory for themselves.
It really connects all the way back to the beginning. If you look like everyone else, if you're a white shirt in a sea of white shirts, you are invisible. You're just part of the background count. To be seen, you have to break the pattern.
That is the through line. The Type-I midshipman fish breaks the pattern by humming. The fanciful trademark breaks the pattern by inventing a new word. And the inattentional blindness study shows us just how strong that pattern matching software in our heads really is.
We spend so much energy filtering. The brain filters the gorilla, the fish brain filters the courtship behavior, the superpower filters the geopolitical map, and the law filters the marketplace.
It's all about efficiency. Filters allow us to function. If we noticed everything, we'd be paralyzed. If a fish tried every mating tactic at once, it would fail. But the danger, and this is the key takeaway for me, is that we forget the filter is even there.
We think we're seeing the whole picture.
We mistake our edited version of reality for the truth. We think we see the gorilla, we think our foreign policy intervention is going to be clean, we think our descriptive business name is unique.
So the challenge for you listening, and for us, is to occasionally just turn off the filter. Stop counting the passes.
Right. The gorilla experiment only works because you are obediently doing the task you were assigned. But what happens if you stop counting?
That's the question I want to leave everyone with today. In your work, in your relationships, or even just scrolling through the news, you are undoubtedly focusing on a specific ball. You are counting the passes.
So take a moment to pause the count, look at the background, look at the noise.
Because there's almost certainly a gorilla walking right past you. And it might be the most important thing in the room.
Or at least the most interesting.
Thanks for diving in with us.
Stay curious.